do is proactively market your acreage for a lease. We handle that marketing part of it. We then work with qualified legal counsel, see the guy here to my right, about negotiating that lease. We're not providing legal services. I'm not an attorney. I don't really want to be. I don't want to go to school anymore. But we market that acreage. Attorneys negotiate the lease. That's what I think is a great first step. We offer some great industry insight in that we work with these various gas companies every day. We know the right people to talk to about leasing. Maybe you're already leased. Maybe you're being approached to sign a pipeline right away. Maybe you have something as what looks as simple as a seismic testing agreement. Maybe you've already been in production, you're receiving royalty income, and you want to talk to us about processing revenue and verifying that you're being paid correctly for the gas coming out of your property. There are a lot of factors that come into play with this process. My opinion is you need a qualified mineral manager, you need a qualified attorney. When we started this program, I spent a lot of time in Texas and in Oklahoma talking to banks about what have they historically done for their clients that are landowners. Of course, they're in their 4th or 5th generation of oil experience in Oklahoma and Texas. The answer was the same at every single institution. It's, well, we provide professional oil and gas or professional mineral management services to landowners. We brought the idea to Pennsylvania. It's gone over well.
The other issue that a lot of people don't think of because they're focused on either the upfront check or the royalty check that they receive on an ongoing basis is it's an asset that they're dealing with that's going to, in most cases, exceed their life expectancy. So you need to prepare to allow your heirs or whoever you're passing those interests on to be able to deal with it in the future. So there's some major estate planning issues that, particularly if you haven't leased your property, are probably most appropriately dealt with today when you don't really know what the value is and you can maximize tax impact.
News Talk 1160 WCCS, our Pennsylvania Gas Expo underway here at the Cavalche Complex. Robert Burnett from Houston Harbor, one of our panel members. And Robert, a question. My neighbors and I have been contacted in regards to allowing seismic testing on our property. What are the positives and negatives to allow this to occur?
Well, seismic testing is often one of the preliminary operations that a gas operator conducts before it decides to embark on a drilling program. I always advise landowners, seismic testing agreements can be tricky in some regards. A lot of times an oil and gas lease will provide a gas operator with the automatic right to come onto the property to conduct those operations. However, sometimes you have the ownership of the surface may be different from the ownership of the mineral rights. So the person who signed the oil and gas rights doesn't own the surface, and the surface owner is the one who grants the seismic testing access. And one of the key components of a seismic test agreement is indemnification. If they come on your property and they're going to conduct seismic testing, whoever it is, whether it's the gas operator or a subcontractor, they need to provide indemnification to the landowners if something goes wrong, which usually doesn't. But if something did go wrong, you want protection built into that agreement so they bear the risks of any such damage. The other thing is the data. The seismic data is very critical. And if you are a landowner and they're coming on your property to conduct seismic testing, you should ask for a copy of the data. It's valuable, and it may be important to know what is the geological makeup of your subsurface. And if you're going to grant them access to come on the property, while you may not be entitled to the full report, I often have I advise clients to sometimes ask for a summary report with the highlights of what the geologic formations are precisely on the property.
Our next question for Malcolm Pauly from S&T Trust. I've been contacted in regards to a pipeline right-of-way being cut through my property. What do I need to be aware of when reviewing that agreement?
I'd love to be able to tell you, but I think that that's most appropriately answered by either Bob Burnett or Wes Storiano. So I'm going to turn that question over to those two gentlemen.
Pipeline right away, first of all, again, I've said this once or twice so far this morning, is often an agreement that's a landowner minimizes the importance of. When a gas company wants to cut a pipeline right away through the property, there's some key things you need to know. How many pipes are going to be in that right of way? What are the permanent and temporary widths to that right-of-way? What are the specific meets and bounds of that pipeline right-of-way? What is the responsibility of that gas company to maintain the right-of-way? These are things that, again, are very important. I haven't even touched on compensation. You know, there's various ways to look at compensation for that, but again, that's another factor that's extremely important. Bob, do you want to chime in on that?
Sure. Often a typical oil and gas lease will grant the gas operator the right to lay as many pipelines as they want or need across the landowner's property. We often try to limit or minimize that language in the lease, and often limit the right of the gas operator to put a pipeline on the property only if it's related to the extraction of oil and gas from that property, and not allow the unlimited right to put pipelines that may transport foreign gas across the property. That being said, if you can negotiate out the broad right to lay pipelines from the lease, and if that's the case, you certainly want to have a separate right-of-way agreement that's negotiated with the gas company. And this is often, I'm seeing the preferred course of action with gas companies, because if the lease would expire down the road, and for example, if they lay the pipeline and the authority for the pipeline is the lease itself, that puts the gas company at risk, because if the lease down the road expires due to non-production or some other default, it puts at risk their pipeline. So oftentimes, the gas operators will want a separate pipeway right-of-way agreement to alleviate that risk of having the lease expire and forcing them to remove the pipeline as well.
In a couple of minutes, we're going to open up questions to the audience, but our final question will direct this to Malcolm Pauley. Gas prices right now very low. What is the long-term forecast for this area because of the current prices?
In many ways, gas prices are kind of a victim of their own success in drilling. Use for gas beyond electricity generation and certain fleet vehicles and heating your homes currently is fairly limited. I know have been some plans out there to move gas usage into the transportation infrastructure. But because we've been so successful in drilling for gas in Pennsylvania and other places around the country, there's been a lot of additional supply come on the market at a time when the demand has been stable at best, if not declining. And that's simple economics. If the supply goes up and demand is at best stable, price has to decline. So prices are probably going to remain relatively low until and unless the demand for gas goes up. And that can happen for a number of different reasons. We could have a colder than normal winter, which could stress the gas supplies because people need it to heat their homes more. I know a lot of electric utilities are switching their power plants from coal to gas because it's cleaner. You don't have any environmental concerns. It's a relatively simple switch. And the cost of putting up new power generation through natural gas is, relatively speaking, inexpensive. So it's, again, an easy switch to power generation usage area. But that's a shorter-term fix. The longer term, in my viewpoint, is to see gas utilization, particularly in the transportation fuel, increase. And that really is a function of infrastructure. We don't have a lot of fueling stations around the country that utilize natural gas, particularly in automobiles. You're starting to see fleet sales go that way. I know the Indigo buses here in Indiana County are fueled using CNG. Waste Management announced not that long ago that they were switching their fleet fuel to natural gas. And as we see that happen, you'll probably see the likelihood of it increasing as a transport fuel. But from my perspective, I think that's really something that will help drive the price of natural gas up. I know people focused a number of years ago, or a couple of years ago, on the fact that the price of gas had kind of de-linked from the price of oil, and that's true. Eventually, that link will probably go back, but right until demand picks up, gas prices are going to probably remain low.
But there's always hope because, as you said, the future, anything can happen in the next 5 or 20 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, gas prices and oil prices, for that matter, run in cycles. They don't remain high forever. They don't remain low forever. They will generally trend higher. From my experience, the time that gas prices, or that oil or gas prices tend higher, is at the time of highest pessimism. So when people think the industry is going to go away, when people think that prices are never going to go up, that's the time it will happen.
Ellen, any closing comments before we take questions from the floor?
Ellen, let me interject one other thing on top of what Malcolm said. You have a glut of supply in the country of oil and gas, and this is the, I'm not going to get political, but this is the point where you can argue for more energy independence for the United States. The Marcellus is geographically the largest gas shale play in the country, but you've got 3, 4, 5 other huge natural gas shales across the country. It seems like there's a new one being discovered every month that are adding to the supply surplus in our country. Malcolm touched on cold winters versus warm winters. Well, we've got gas storage fields at their highest levels in the country in their history. I'm not sure how many billion cubic feet, I can't remember the number, but huge amounts of gas. There's gas storage fields, obviously, in Pennsylvania that are full of natural gas. So that's just a little add-on to what Malcolm was saying. It's not just here, it's nationwide.
Okay, I believe we are now leaving our radio audience on 1160 WCCS, but we're going to still stay up here for another 10 or 15 minutes, and Ellen, we'll take questions from the floor. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Sure, just one quick question. What can landowners expect with gas prices being kind of flat right now? Would they just sit this out and wait for the cycle to reach the high point again?
Well, you can certainly sit it out, but I think there's a lot of things they can do. One, from my perspective, one of the more obvious things is do your estate planning and deal with an asset that probably is at a lower value today than it will be in the future. But there is going to be a lot of activity. One of the issues that the industry faced in Pennsylvania is there's not a lot of transportation infrastructure in place. You need pipeline. You can punch the hole in the ground, you can bring the gas to the surface, but how do you get it from the wellhead to where it needs to be? So you're probably going to see a lot more pipeline right-of-way requests. There's going to be a lot more seismic activity. I know people in my office that have very small parcels of land. As a matter of fact, a young lady that works for me that has a condo got a letter saying, we want to do seismic testing on your property. Well, it's a fraction of an acre. But those types of things are going to happen.
And I've just been told that we are going to stay on 1160 here. We have some folks that are really interested in our topic, so we invite